Hello, everybody. Welcome to Bill and Amon's Bogus Hangout. I'm going to have our guests introduce themselves. Zara,
Hi,
please
I'm
introduce
Zara
yourself.
Altair. Yeah, I'm Zara Altair, and I do a web writing, semantic web writing for
Doc,
business.
Doc,
Sheldon of Intrinsic Value SEO. I'm technical SEO consultant.
Terry.
Terry van Horne. I guess I'm administrator at SEO Pros. I'm retired from all other business pretty much.
And I'm Bill Slosky of SEO by the Sea, and I'm the director of SEO research at Go Fish Digital. So we were talking before we started the show today about the sandbox. Do you all remember the sandbox?
Yeah, I played frequently in the sandbox. Spent lots of time in the sand on the golf course as well.
So we often get told that there was no Google sandbox. It was a myth. And the effect of the sandbox was that news sites seemed to have some type of penalty against them and would be have difficulties in ranking. And people presumed that there was some type of effect that was caused by Google to keep sites from showing up in search results. My opinion was always that it was a cold start problem. A lot of businesses that start up have challenges getting known because they're unknown quantities. They have to put up street signs. They have to get listed in places like Yellow Pages, and it takes a while to get all those things happening. And this was like 2004, so there were Yellow Pages back then.
Yeah, I think what we often forgot to consider was the fact, you start a new site, a new business, or even just a new site online. It's not just a matter of Google finding you. They also have to find any and all other entities out there that might be lending you any credibility in the way of links or whatever. So when they're doing that every 5 weeks, there's going to be something that you could consider to be a sandbox effect. You've been up for 6 weeks and finally it's starting to show up. That's actually what the best you hope for.
But in the end, right? If SEOs had have done a site search, they would have found that site didn't have any pages in the index.
Yeah, well, some did.
Because the real problem, it turns out, was that there was a schedule for indexing back then.
Yep.
Just like there was a Google Dance, pretty well monthly.
So what was a Google Dance? Not the one in
Mountain View.
Mountain View.
Right.
The actual Google Dance, no dancing involved.
Right. That was when they basically updated the link graph and all the listings and everything changed all at once.
Every time they refreshed, you'd see a lot of fluctuation. Yeah.
Right.
So Google's index was a batch processed index.
It has been for a very long time.
It was
very recently that we got real-time indexing.
Right. The caffeine indexer is an incremental indexing, and it updates as pages get refreshed. It only grabs new content from those pages, and it adds those to the index. And that's the difference between caffeine and Google before caffeine.
That made a tremendous difference. Yeah.
And also, you can those sorts of things happen on every kind of an update like that. So, for instance, when they did the Panda and Penguin updates, Dave and I watched those because most of our work was around that, right? We found that there is a 5-day window, right? So if they said it happened on this day, you actually had to take a 10-day period to actually figure out what window it happened in. You know
And
what I mean?
And by Google Dance, what they meant was during those during those batch updates every 5 weeks or so, results would fluctuate a lot for a period of time around the updates. So
Yes.
you might look up your site to see where you rank for your favorite keyword terms and find that you're 5 spots lower than you used to be. You're 5 spots higher. And next time you look, you're at a different spot completely. And that was known as a Google Dance because it shook all around.
Lots of those back then.
So sites would not show up immediately in Google search results because the index didn't update until every 5 weeks later.
And you also have to consider, Bill, they have billions of pages in the index. So whenever they do anything like that, it isn't like they flip a switch and everything happens.
It's a gradual rollout, yeah.
Right. It takes days for them to update their index fully. Probably up to a week, I bet. Now, with how many pages they have.
Right. So you add your site to the web, it gets indexed. You show up in the index 5 weeks later. Afterwards, people start linking to you. You don't get credit for those links for another 5 weeks.
Right.
It's a cold start. It's a slow start type thing.
And that's why people could put a bunch of spam up, take it down, put it back up, take it back. That's what they were doing for the Google Dance. I saw lots of sites that were doing that nonsense.
Well, and talking about the way that things had to roll out because there was such a massive amount of data being updated. 5, 6 years ago when I started doing some work in Australia, I was noticing that there was a lag of anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks between what we would see rolled out in Western Europe or in the US and Canada and it finally being rolled out in Australia. Because they had to, especially major updates, they had to roll them out geographically. There's a finite amount of processing power there. If they dedicated everything to nothing but updating, they would still probably take 2 or 3 days to do it, and they wouldn't be able to do anything else. It would have taken you 15 seconds to get a search result.
That's partially language related too.
Well, partially, but I mean, Australian English and UK English and American English are not that different.
But they are different indexes.
Well, yeah, but supposedly they're not now. From what I understand, the index now is multilingual.
And there are filters on them.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
So when someone in the US searches for football and someone in the UK searches for football, they should expect different results. And the same with somebody from Australia. They'll get them
from the same index. Just via filter. Yeah.
It'll be filtered by a preferred country.
Also, the country thing is important because you see Canadian and US, our language, Canadians, our English is probably closer to UK English than it is to US, but index, we don't get put in with the UK. We're with America.
Yeah.
So it's kind of weird how they're doing it. It comes down to each country because in Canada, we're bilingual, right? So there's a French index and a English index.
Well, that didn't stop me when I lived 5 miles down the coast here in Cardiff, California. When I searched for Cardiff pizza, I would get results from Wales.
Right. Yep.
You have to type Cardiff by the sea.
So it was developed in the early 1900s, and the developer, his wife was from Cardiff. So he named it Cardiff, and he named all the streets after places like Oxford and Glasgow and so on. And so they had it was just odd doing those searches and seeing the places in the UK show up. Say, Google, you know where my IP address is located. You know this is 5 miles away from where I'm at. So, we were also talking before the show started about DNS records.
Yeah.
How many of y'all would feel comfortable about editing or modifying DNS records?
Well, clarifying. I mean, changing your address, to point a site is one thing. That's pretty simple. But to getting into the files and modifying it, I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole. In fact, there are very few people I would trust enough to let them touch it.
Yeah.
A handful that I can think of that I would even want in there, But I ain't one of them.
So Google is allowing people to modify DNS. How does Google verification with DNS work?
What happened was today I went to the Google console to check out Webmaster Tools for the new snippets thing. So when I went there, at first I didn't know where the heck I was because it had all these options, and one of them, and it seemed like the one they wanted you to pick was doing site verification through your DNS. And they said, well, go to your provider and change this. First of all, okay, folks, if you use this for your SEO, every time you changed SEOs, you'd have to go to your DNS and update the record. So that should be the top of the list reason why you shouldn't do this. There's absolutely no benefit to you for using that method of verification. And
there are other ways to do verification.
Yes. Can I tell my favorite, Bill?
Sure. Yeah.
My favorite is the file method. What a lot of people haven't understood is that file is the same for every site you verify. So when you get one, save it. When you get a client, you send the file to them, ask them to put it on their FTP or whatever it is, and you're good to go. You have access to Webmaster Tools. It also is the easiest way, because the first thing I do when I'm looking at a site that I've got is pull the old verification and throw it out the window, which means that other SEO no longer has access to Webmaster Tools. I can't tell you how many times I found other webmasters that still had access to clients' Webmaster Tools. The biggest offender of that is analytics, because it's so damn hard to remove that. Like, I can't do it. Basically, in the old days, I know now you can say, remove this one from my thing. But in the old days, I found it very hard to remove a client from analytics.
Yeah, in the old days, the only people that could get it done was basically
the owner.
The owner.
Right.
So David in our comments says, I think you lose access to the legacy crawl report when you use DNS.
Ooh.
So that's another reason. The legacy crawl report when you use DNS.
So you get to use the old crawl report.
No, he's saying you lose access to the legacy crawl report when you use DNS for verification.
There's another good reason not to do it.
Oh, there's an even bigger reason not to do it. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Well, I think you used to get traffic to your website. I can't tell for sure.
Yeah, I can't see why Google would want that. Like, what would be the benefit to Google to having that in the DNS records?
My first thought would be for security reasons. I don't know though. I just thinking it briefly through, I can't imagine how. But there's two valid reasons already in existence without talking about DNS. I can't imagine why in the world they would even consider any third reason, unless it was either going to be easier for users, which this obviously isn't, or more secure for users, which I don't see how it would be.
Oh, it would be more secure because you have to be able to log in to the
host
registrar in order to do that. And you get a message telling you that someone's been messing around in your DNS.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas with the file, they could do it by just hacking your FTP server.
I mean, I can go to your site and I can lift your file very easily, but what can I do with it?
No, how could you lift my file? It's in my.
I know what
server.
I know what it looks like. All I got to do is find the number. That's in the source code. I just got to find your account. I know what the structure of the file is. I mean, it's only 2 lines.
Right.
So I could very easily do it. But what would I accomplish by doing so? All I could do is basically put another site's data into your GSC, which isn't going to accomplish anything for me. Why would I bother? Just to screw with you,
if you wanted to screw with me, yeah.
Yeah, that would be.
Don't give me any ideas, Doc.
So it just doesn't. I can't imagine why, other than making it easier or making it more secure, and it certainly doesn't make it any easier.
Yeah, and people shouldn't, unless you really know what you're doing, don't mess with it because you're playing.
I always use the file too. It's just so damn quick and easy.
Well, to me, I had a client who I was basically looking at like 15 or 20 sites. So, for them, it was real easy. They had the file when we went on to the next site that I was going to work on. They dropped the file in there and removed it from the other one, which gave me only access to the one I was working on.
Okay, Terry, to backtrack a little bit, you said you were going to Google Search Console to look at featured snippets?
Yeah, see if there was a featured snippet report, etc. Yeah.
Okay. So
I didn't find it.
Oh, okay. So there was a story about featured filter snippet.
Well,
featured snippet filter.
Right. Well, Google puts codes into URLs and stuff so that they know what's going on and can count stuff, track it. And Gabe found.
They have codes behind the scenes in the search results page.
Right.
Yeah.
And he found one that seemed to be saying they were looking to filter out a report for featured snippets, which I think is probably needed since there is a decision to be made about featured snippets, in my opinion, for having looked at them closely.
So
whether or not you want a featured snippet to show?
Yeah. And this way, if they actually put it in Web Console and could give you statistics about what was happening in that search, that would be awesome. That would give you the stats to make a informed decision rather than a guess.
Because there's nothing that tells you whether or not you've won a featured snippet or not, as it is now.
Right, or how many, I guess once you have the snippet in there, you could backtrack, figure out how many impressions that search got by going into one of the other reports, right? But
there's nothing that actually tells you. you
No.
have a featured snippet
You got to know to
appearing.
look for it. Yeah.
It's more
You
research.
have to look for it. And on the search console, because I was looking at this morning on the search console under the results, which is where Google tells you to go look for that stuff.
Yeah.
It's what's the word, fait accompli. It's either it's happened or it hasn't happened, but there's no notice that you get that says, hey, you got it.
It says no snippets for you.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't
Snippet
though.
Nazi.
It's got some
Snippet
information about
Nazi. Yeah,
it's got some information about some structured data,
right.
like the search box search result, or whether or not you've got a anchor. It does provide some information about some of the structured data.
That's
Right.
the structured data report.
Yeah,
I don't know if it's still there. Like I said, I had a quick look this morning. I was kind of
Yeah.
busy, but that's where I found that Google had changed the requirements for some schemas. Was when they told me, "Hey, your scheme is broken." It verified still, but in their opinion, it was broken because it didn't have all the required elements.
But that was just a warning, not an error, right?
They were calling it error in Webmaster Tools. In the structured data tool, it was calling it a warning.
Yeah, it
But-
was. But now they're doing rich results tests. I'm still trying to get familiar with that, but it's
they're
different.
supposedly going to be working on that rich results tool to provide more information.
Yeah, it looks like also they're going to, or could use that to, for instance, I don't get a knowledge panel,
Yeah.
right? Even though I'm over half of the results for my name. Well, that's because there's someone else with that name.
So Search Console shows you breadcrumbs, it shows you logos, site links, search box, and those are based on the structured data.
Mhm.
It could show you more than that. Would you want it to?
Yep.
I would.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would like to see in here that I would like people to be able to see in here that they're getting a knowledge panel.
Yep.
Because it's usually based upon your specific website. They choose which website to show the knowledge panels associated with.
Yeah, it'd definitely be good information to have.
It would be good information because I had a knowledge panel and I didn't know that. And David Ammon said, "Hey, did you know?" He sent me a note, and I was like, "No, I had no idea." So yeah,
I actually believe that that's part of or will be part of the people cards that they announced a little while back.
Yep.
Yeah.
And Bill talked to me anyhow. I don't know if he'll want to bring it up here. Andy wrote an article about user graph, right, Bill?
Who wrote the article about user graph? I'm sorry.
I thought you did.
Okay, a user specific knowledge graph.
Right.
Yeah. It's hard to say. That might be tied to that. It's difficult to see how much different it is from things that you're doing with Google Plus profile.
And when I was speaking to, not to drop names, but Dixon there a few days ago, and he told me that using that link below the knowledge panel that's in place and saying, hey, I should have one too, he was actually able to get a knowledge panel.
really
Bill.
by using that
Yeah.
link. Okay.
I don't know if it was on his name, but he did get one.
He was having problems getting a knowledge panel because they're showing one for Dixon Jones, which is an architectural firm.
Ah,
He's also a very famous architect, I believe.
Dixon
person.
Jones. Yeah.
yeah, Dixon Jones.
Right. And that
So-
was my. So I believe that those knowledge panels, they like, for instance, if an SEO comes to Google and searches on my name, do you think
Yeah.
he's looking for me or a senator who died about a decade ago?
If I followed what Google's doing, they're most likely looking for that senator.
Okay. But if they're looking to provide the best answer for that user, it's me,
I think you're right. Yeah.
right? So if they have people being able to click that link, identify who they are, and say, here's why I should have one too,
Yeah.
I think they can do it based on history. People's web history, their search history, they would be able to do that. Correct?
They maintain some fairly long histories, search histories.
Yeah.
They know who's looking for what. Yeah.
So I'm thinking that they're, because that's a problem for them when Terry van Horne is a pretty, believe it or not, is a pretty common name.
Well, there are at least two of them that we know of.
Well, no, there's more than that because there's three in Toronto. One of them is head of the Masons. I get calls for him on the telephone all the time.
Really?
Yeah.
So they give you the secret? No, they don't give you a secret handshake.
No, I tell him,
No.
You're not looking for me. You're looking for this fellow over here.
So you have all his contact information now, Terry?
Pardon me?
You have all his contact information, so you can
No,
direct.
just know from someone who called me, told me about the guy's history, that he was head of the Masons and blah, blah,
Oh,
blah.
I see.
Because I asked him, why do people keep calling me and asking me these questions?
So
And
you
he
don't
said,
get.
This is why.
So you don't get to go to the Mason parties and all.
No, no. I'm not very good with bricks.
But it's funny you say that. I got an invite by mail one time, many, many years ago, probably 45, 50 years ago, inviting me to a big shindig at the mayor of San Diego's residence. And I was a punk sailor at the time, so it seemed likely to me that somebody had messed up. So I started investigating. I found out the chairman of the board of the San Diego Zoo at that time had my same name. And they looked up and found a mailing address for who they thought was him, and they sent it to me. So I got a hold of him, and I said, I have an invite here for you. If you give me your proper address, I'll be glad to forward it on. He says, don't worry, I'll just make a phone call and get him to send me another one. He's died now. Well, I had a chance to go drink the mayor's liquor, and I blew it.
Who invited the sailor?
Wow, you can tell that they're getting better, because there was a day when he was actually in the Senate and he wasn't even on the first page for that name. It was all me. He wasn't real active or anything, but and that's when I actually wrote quite often.
Well, I don't remember him. I don't know if he went to the same law school I did at the same time. I know he went to my law school.
There you go.
I'm not sure when, but I'm curious now.
In regards to snippets, there was also an article in Search Engine Journal about how you get rid of snippets. Well, that has actually been around for a lot longer than people realize. There's been a no snippet tag, I guess, for going back to like 2005, as I understand it.
Yeah,
And-
much longer than there were featured snippets.
Right. And that was actually to remove any snippet. So in other words, that took away the meta description from the result. And I actually have seen Google results that is missing.
I seem to remember people were getting upset because Google was using information from the Open Directory project as snippet.
Right, but they had the no ODP tag for that.
And they had one for for Yahoo directory.
Here's the other thing, is that if you use no snippet,
Yeah,
it also stops a preview of any video from opening on the server. So you can't get a preview either. Okay, so Google recommends using what they call the max snippet.
yeah.
And that you have to just reduce the number of characters until they remove the snippet. Right? So then you kept any other features and just were cutting out the snippet that you didn't want. So that way you don't have to mess with your page, right? And you get the snippet removed.
I'm not sure I understand your directions.
What do you mean?
So you use max snippet as an attribute for
Right.
meta robots.
Yeah, you use that meta robots tag, the max snippets, and you put a number of characters and keep reducing it until Google removes a snippet. However, that's not guaranteed that's going to happen.
So you reduce the number of characters in the tag.
Right, until it removes the snippet.
Eventually, you get under the threshold. Yeah.
Yeah. The method I like best, and this also cures Google's putting stuff in my meta description that I don't like, which is the data snippet, where you can put that into a span, and everything in that span is not included in any snippet. So if there was something that you didn't want in your meta description,
I like that.
or something, to me, that's the best way to fix this.
There was a point in time where Yahoo experimented with the no index on page tags where they would say no index content between these tags.
Yeah.
Inline directives.
Only Yahoo had that. Google didn't have that, but
this is an attribute of a tag like span. And it only works in certain ones: span, div, and section.
I remember that Yandex was there was some discussion, user discussion, as to whether Yandex might implement that. That's been 3 or 4 years ago. I don't have any idea if they ever did or not, to be able to remove certain content on the page from snippet. I have to go check that out, see if they ever did that.
Yeah, I included it all in my article on featured snippets. That includes the video that me and Bill did the other day. Very good. I added to it quite a bit, including this kind of information that we didn't have in the video. So the posters.
Boy, I really like that idea of using a span though to eliminate stuff.
Or a div, yeah.
That could be handy. Take a div too.
Yeah. Or a section. So if there was a section of your site, say for instance, if you had a disclaimer that you didn't want indexed, you could put that in a div and tell it not to index it.
I like that.
It would be interesting. Oh, if it's a no index, that means that it wouldn't be included as content for the page either, which would be
right. And historically, Google had been able to identify things like disclaimers as boilerplate.
Oh, okay, and they just remove it themselves.
Yeah.
But only if it's showing site wide, right? I mean,
no, because you
have
can have boilerplate that covers only a number of pages.
Yeah, 1 or 2 pages. Yeah.
Say you're using 5 different templates on a site, and you're using one template for 20%, one template for 30%, one template for 5%. And you could have boilerplate on each of those templates. And Google may say, okay, we're not going to index the copyright statement on those pages because it's boilerplate.
Yeah, some sites like law firms want a disclaimer on every page.
Yeah. So the best disclaimer I put on the page was we optimized a friend's legal site, his law practice site, and we created pages for all the local courts because we figured people in the area would search for the courts, and having his site show up ranked well for each of the courts would be a smart thing to do, because they would see his site and read what he wrote about the courts. And he had worked at a couple of the courts before he became a solo practitioner. And one of the middle level courts, the Court of Common Pleas, he put pictures of all the judges on that page. So the judges complained to him. This is our court. We don't work for you. We don't want us on your page. And he said, that's okay. We'll take care of it. And he said, Bill, write me a disclaimer for this page saying the appearance of the judges don't mean that they're your employees and they don't work for you. I said, sure.
But leave the pictures up.
Right, but leave the pictures up.
I love it.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I used to put them in inline frames so that didn't have to worry about that as separate content. But then which they changed later and started counting that content as part of the page too.
Well, didn't you used to use inline frames for ads, for AdSense, stuff like that, to keep that from being indexed?
Sometimes that would be one way. Also, it's an easy way to put something across the whole site and only have to update one thing to put it across the whole site. Now we just use PHP in an inclusion.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Okay, so they updated WordPress to version 5.5. And it looks like there's a bug that broke lots of sites.
Well, it should have broken lots of sites because if they were using jQuery, that was as old as the internet.
So they missed out on was it jQuery Migrate, which allowed older versions of jQuery to
plug in.
It allowed older versions of jQuery to continue working.
Oh, I should check that because there was a header that I wanted to add for security, and I couldn't add it because WordPress broke that one because of the jQuery was old.
Yeah,
I think talk to you privately about that in the past.
And I had just spent 3 days troubleshooting one of my sites, and I had warnings appearing on a page at the top of the page that no tool could detect. That there was no issue, but I was getting these warnings. And I come to find out finally yesterday, I got to talk to Roger after I saw his article and talked to him a little bit. That got me thinking about something else. Anyway, I went into my hosting panel and found that somebody had turned on debugging. And that's why these things, as soon as I turned that off, the problem went away. But it was
turning debugging on in WordPress.
Yeah. No, well, it's from the cPanel.
From the cPanel.
Oh, okay. Because there's also, you can turn debugging on and off in WordPress. Too.
No, this was on the cPanel.
On the cPanel.
Yeah. And,
I don't know if that's where I'd want to be doing that.
So who turned it on? I mean, how did it get?
I would assume that one of the developers at the host did. It's common to turn it on and use it to check something and then turn it back off again. And apparently, in my case at least, it's also common to at least twice turn it on, test something, and forget to turn it off again. Because that happened to me about a year ago, too.
Mm-hmm.
But my short memory, I didn't remember that, so I got to troubleshoot it for 3 days again before I finally found it. Anyway, shout out to Roger Monty. Thanks for the hand, buddy.
Yeah, I've been reading a lot of his stuff. He's pretty good.
Oh yeah, he's sharp. He comes up with some good stuff. He was the one who asked me. He says, "Well, what does it show you the problem in DevTools?" Well, that's what had thrown me because I looked at DevTools and it did not detect an issue. And he says, "Well, how about your site health?" And I said, "Oh, that's a good idea. I haven't tried that." So I went to the site health tool and checked it, and it didn't detect any issue either. That's when it dawned on me. It's okay. This has got to be coming from the host. And sure enough, it was in the debugging.
And how did you know to go there?
How did I know what?
To go there for debugging.
Well, it was the only logical place it could be coming from.
Okay.
You know, if the problem didn't exist in the code for the site, it had to be getting injected someplace.
So did you have to contact the provider and have them?
No, I just went into the Plesk and turned it off.
Oh, okay. See, I wouldn't give you that kind of CPAN.
It took some getting used to, but I like the Plesk panel. There's an awful lot of meat in there on those bones.
Yeah.
But it took some getting used to, and there is some danger in there too. You know, if you just start to, what does this button do? You're not going to like the answer.
No, it's not something where you press it and see what
and
happens.
I say that from personal experience, boys.
Yeah.
What does this button do is never a good approach.
No. You look up what it does first.
Yeah. Rules on how not to run your website. Yes.
That's another thing, control panel. Some stuff I'll do, some I look to my brother.
So I thought it was interesting in that same article, the WordPress 5.5, that there are over 200 themes with conflicts too, because people people trust their themes, as it were.
Yeah, but of the 200, 80% of them are probably on 5 themes. There's a number like that said most of them are on 5 of the bad ones.
Okay.
Which if 200's not really that many compared to how many WordPress themes.
Yeah, well, it's true.
There's more
That's
than just the repository.
Yeah. There's no shortage of them, that's for sure. Another thing I found interesting was John Mueller tweeted a list of signals they use for canonicalization. That's something I'm wrestling with right now because I didn't realize that you had to put a canonical tag. I thought if there wasn't one, Google just says, well, there is no canonical. Apparently, they decide themselves what it is.
They do. Yep.
For instance, I have profiles on my directory, or did. I turned them off because not quite ready for prime time.
Yeah.
Google got a hold of it, and one of the things I noticed in the search console when I was looking through it this morning was that they didn't care. They had removed a bunch of pages, or as they put it, excluded a bunch of pages for being the same, or they canonicalized it all to one, where there was a parameter that said SEO and then a code that identified them. Well, they just cut it all back to the main directory, which the problem is that's not actually a page.
So when I changed my site to HTTPS 2 months ago, 3 months ago,
right?
I didn't go in and create the new search console, the HTTPS search console, immediately. It took me 2 days to create a new one.
Right.
So I created a new one, the HTTPS version, and I switched over to that, and it was telling me that there were a lot of pages where it disagreed with my choice of canonical URL because I was using the HTTPS version as a canonical.
Right.
And it was thinking I should be using the HTTP version.
Right. Because their thing says, no, this is an HTTP site.
Right.
Yeah. My problem was they didn't like the pages. They excluded them because they thought they were all the same. Because it's a template with variables dropped into it. However, they're all different firms. Just weren't enough for them because there were only 4 showing at the time. I think they said, well, these are all pretty well the same. Well, they were because it was a test. I used the same thing for each one of them.
Same template?
Yeah.
Wow, that's really
with the same template, but pretty well the same information going into it too. So all that was really different was the code, right? So I used the same data, filled a fake database basically to test it. Somehow they got that URL and notified me that I need to add a canonical tag to that page now when I finish programming.
They're excluding them from being indexed because they were identical.
Or thought that they were too closely, you know what I mean, excluded because we thought they were pretty much all the same page.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking if I put a canonical in that says this is the page, basically, by making it the URL, the full URL, right?
Yeah. So it's worth going into Google Search Console and looking at the coverage tab
Oh,
and
for
to,
sure.
to see and look at the excluded pages and see why they're excluded, and if they are pages that you don't think should be excluded, trying to figure out a way to get them indexed.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
bet there's an awful lot of e-commerce sites facing that problem too.
Oh, what about
Yeah, I
me?
would think so.
I only have 60 pages, but they had 150 of those URLs. You know why?
Why?
Because I blocked all the feeds on my site. I don't let Google do my RSS feed or any of that other stuff because the RSS includes stuff that I don't want them to include. Sometimes, for instance, they put the whole article into it. Or it'll have a URL that you had a no follow. Dan Fees turned me on to this. No followed is removed in your,
On RSS?
yeah.
Yeah.
That ain't good.
So the
No.
URLs with feeds, they're not indexing.
Yeah, I
They're-
told
they're-
them I don't
they're-
want them.
Right, automatically they're not indexing. They're excluding them. I
Right.
didn't tell them. I didn't want them indexed.
Oh, see, I did.
Yeah, I
So what
didn't.
I should do is remove that
Yeah.
from my robots text.
Right. They aren't going to index those.
Good to know. I did not know that
Yeah.
because they used to.
I mean, they're not even HTML, right? They're
Yeah,
XML.
they're XML, right?
Yeah.
But don't they pull data out of there?
What kind of data are you afraid they
For
might be
instance,
pulling
if
out?
they found a link in it, right? This is why I no index them because
They're
man.
not they're not
They're-
funneling PageRank through those.
okay. See, Dan told me that they were pulling those URLs, right? That
Right.
a site had no follow in the attribute, but in the RSS feed, the link had no follow attribute.
Right. If they see a URL in a JSON script, they're also not doing anything with that.
Okay. My bad then. Thank you. I learned something today, folks. Thanks, Bill.
Oh, you're welcome.
I didn't know I was misinformed.
Yeah, I was just I get to the excluded part now. There's one set. I look at them. They're all /feed. Said, okay, well that's
Yeah.
good to know. They're not indexing those. So there is a lot to
Then
be
why
learned.
is it? Oh, so even if I were to remove the no index, right?
Yeah,
They're
right.
going to tell me that they're still excluding them.
Right.
Oh, okay. Good to know that too. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. I think that's all the news today.
No, there's one more I think that was kind of interesting. You buy an old domain,
Right.
Oh, right.
and it's not automatically mobile friendly.
Even if it is.
Mobile first, I mean.
Yeah,
It's-
because as John explained it,
It hasn't been made mobile first indexing automatically
right. He
Because
said
you-
basic. Oh, okay.
because you bought it new, because you bought it from somebody.
Bought it from somebody.
Buying it from
Right.
somebody doesn't make it mobile mobile first indexed.
Yeah, a new registration would, but an old registration doesn't. Change of ownership doesn't necessarily do it.
Right. And his explanation is that basically when non-responsive sites are on like a list, and if that site was non-responsive, right?
Yeah.
And then they dropped the domain and you bought it and put a responsive site on it, it still wouldn't get into
It's
the
still on
mobile
that list.
first index.
Would sort of say is
Because it's on the list.
Google doesn't necessarily know when a domain acquires a new owner.
Right.
Well,
So-
plus they'd have to re-index it too, recrawl it, because they've got it on this list that says it's not responsive.
Well,
It's not going to cost.
here's an example. Many years ago, there was a site called stars.com, and it did HTML and basically HTML and web related tutorials. Okay.
Yeah.
They sold the domain to a company that was basically doing stars, like like celebrities and stuff. They acquired, even back in the day, we're talking like I'd only been on the net a little while and Google had only been around a while. They knew right away that it was different content and they didn't pass the page rank from the old domain. From stars, from the original to the new one. So basically, they bought a useless domain.
They cut off the page rank and they cut off the hypertext relevance.
Right.
Because if you had anchor text pointing to the site that was about HTML tutorials, that has nothing to do with Hollywood.
Right. And also, like, I don't think people really realize how Google has tried to categorize sites almost from day one, which is how they would know this site is about HTML tutorials and this one's about Hollywood. So, they've been able to do that for a long time.
Yeah. It's not something they talk a lot about. Even the earliest pages or papers about PageRank, they don't one of them mentions hypertext relevance a little bit, like one sentence, but that's it.
Right. Well, the chef doesn't tell you the main ingredient in secret sauce either.
No, well, not most of them.
Not the good ones, anyhow, or the ones who are making bank.
Well, they learn. I mean, I got a cookbook from Paul Prudhomme on Cajun cooking, and it had his blackened spice mix. It was the first edition that had the blackened spice mix. And later editions didn't include that.
Right, because he realized he was giving away the farm.
Right.
Or they also started selling those spices, didn't they?
I think he did, yeah.
Yeah, he ended up with, I think, a whole line of spices.
Yeah, I was cooking in a restaurant. I got some salmon. I made the blackened mix and cooked up the salmon, and people were staring at me saying, "What in the world are you doing?" And I remember that restaurant. Yeah. Is it supposed to be black like that?
No, that's great. You just need to serve those drinks in the pint jars.
Uh-huh.
Remember those? Yeah.
So that restaurant ended up cooking lots of blackened fish after that.
Yeah.
Now I'm hungry for some blackened catfish.
Yeah.
Love that stuff. With hush puppies,
That'd be good.
wouldn't it?
There's a ribs place near Maine, Virginia that made great hush puppies. Merge into the cooking show here.
In Canada, the only hush puppies we have go on your feet.
You guys got poutine. That's a poor trade-off, mate. I'll go with the hush puppies. Thank you kindly.
Mm-hmm. And the poor boys.
Oh yeah. God, I hadn't had one of those since I was about knee high to somebody.
I'm not sure if there's any places around here that serve those.
I doubt it.
Any?
They'd
last
be
time I
ashamed
had
to
one was
put that
down
on a
Mississippi.
menu.
There was a place when we lived in Queens, in New York City,
Yeah.
that had poor boys that was every bit as good as what you could get down in Mississippi.
Mm.
But I haven't seen one since then. Certainly not out here on the West Coast, and not out in Texas either. And if you did, it would probably be a poor copy. Kind of like going to Mexico City to have Philadelphia cheesesteak. You know? Good luck with that.
I know there are a couple Philadelphia cheesesteak places around me in Carlsbad.
Are
I'm
there?
not sure. I'm not sure there are any Cajun places.
There's a couple Cajun places down here in San Diego, but I haven't been to any of them, so I can't. They're popular. They get good reviews, but I haven't tried them.
Mm-hmm.
Philly cheese is popular. I used to have them up here on the menu at noon, at lunch.
Oh, a good Philly cheese is like manna from heaven, but boy, you talk to somebody who lives in Philadelphia and tell them you got one in
No, you're okay.
they'll cut your throat. No, you didn't.
Uh-huh. And there's some things here in California you can get that you can't get anywhere else. Like a tri-tip sandwich.
Yeah.
No, that's
What?
true.
It's
Oh, what
a-
Terry said.
Tri-tip. It's a cut of meat that's very lean. So it's something I think most people on the East Coast have no idea about, because tri-tip gets turned into hamburger on the East Coast.
I had never heard of tri-tip until I moved back to California.
Yeah, I gotta go.
Okay,
Later,
I'll
Terry.
see
See you next week.
Okay, Terry.
I mean,
you take care. We're at the top of the hour, folks, so we're gonna call it a show. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone.
Take care now.